Hello and welcome to Caesar's Snack Sandwich. Today I'm going to take a quick look at Gelato. Now, I've been using Gelato for quite some time, but recently I just came into here and I was going to make another task that I wanted to automate, and I found that they have this new version out, maybe a version 2 or something. So if you have been using the legacy or the Gelato for some of your automations, then I would highly suggest you to come and read the docs. It's an upgraded version, and as you can see, they're going to sunset the legacy version and you need to migrate your tasks by like June 30th, 2024. You have some time, but I would definitely not put it off forever. Consider migrating as soon as possible to avoid any issues with your automation in that sense. Okay, so I'm going to go through the upgraded features, and then for those people who have no idea what Gelato is, I'm going to kind of dig in deep and kind of talk a little bit about each of the little features. What does this thing do? But for those who don't already know what it does and are already using it, I'm going to just talk about the upgrades first, okay? So the first upgrade we see here is 1Balance, okay? Now 1Balance is pretty interesting, but I do see some restrictions in it right now, okay? So 1Balance allows you to deposit USDC on Polygon into a single wallet balance, right? Now that one single wallet balance will be used to pay automation across all of the networks for all of your automation tasks that you set up, okay? Now they do say in the docs that they're going to expand this network from Polygon to other chains, but there's no like set dates and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of a limitation here because obviously you need to keep that 1Balance high enough to pay the transaction costs across everything. And if there's no way to automate, well, maybe you could, but it's quite complicated way to automate, abstracting, extracting some value from the actions of your system, and then using some of that to fund this 1Balance. So you're going to have to probably do this manually or stuff. But there are notifications. You can set up notifications to kind of tell you when your balance is getting low and go fund it with some more money and stuff like that. Now, there are these subscriptions here, and I'm not sure if they've always had these subscriptions or not, or if has had any changes in it. But I would like consider this. Like I use the free plan, so I never really looked deep into the subscriptions and stuff like that. Because 90,000 monthly runs for me was more than enough, right? So there are ways to like upgrade it. So if you have like more than 90,000 runs, you're doing crazy, you can kind of go with this. And you will pay for this out of your 1Balance account, okay? So from your 1Balance, you can pay for that subscription, okay? Now, what else? What else? Okay, over to Relay. Relay is the next thing, okay? Relay is pretty interesting, okay? And it's kind of like account abstraction for your users. So this one's a little bit restricted because you kind of have to add some code to your smart contracts, and then this thing will have the power to execute transactions on behalf of your users, and they will not need to pay any gas. Well, they will pay gas through some other, through like account abstraction types ideas where maybe they swap token for token, and you take a small amount of one of those tokens and you use this to fund your 1Balance, and then the 1Balance relayer contract has the power to execute that contract on behalf of the user. Now this is kind of complicated, so you're going to have to really get into the docs and read more because you have to give it some modifiers like the only relayer can call type thing, and there's a lot of standards inside here. I think this is interesting because it allows, like I said, it allows users to have a better user experience, and the devs just need to do a bit of homework and maybe have to upgrade or redeploy their contracts to to use this relayer feature. Okay, so I'm not going to go into every little detail here because I don't, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to read everything anyways. So I'm just kind of introducing the idea that they have this system here now, okay? Now, I'm going to go through these functions here. There are some upgrades. There are some changes to these functions and the tasks that you can build. So if you're familiar with Gelato, I would stick around a little bit, but I know that I'm just kind of going to go into each of these functions and kind of not really create a task, but kind of show you what it's kind of like to do a task, okay? So what a task is you first got to have to consider the trigger. Like when do you want this thing to constantly like trigger, trigger, trigger. Now, what would you, some examples of things you might want to trigger are like, when this contract builds up a certain amount of assets, I want to put those assets to work, or I want to disperse them to the team, or I want to do something like this, or I want when this farm builds up enough assets inside it, I want to harvest those, compound them like a volt, and then add them to the LP and stuff like this, like a yearn volt harvest call. So these are the type of things you obviously don't want to be doing manually every 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 1 hour, what have you. So you can have Gelato kind of do this, and it's going to use your 1Balance to pay those gases. Okay. So when I first made tasks, all they had was this time interval, or you could deploy another smart contract, and that smart contract would then, kind of have the logic of when to do this. But they've added some features here that kind of make it a little bit more user friendly. Okay, so they still have time interval, and now they have this thing called chronological expressions where you can be a little more specific of your time. Like, look at this, at 12 a.m. on the day 1 of the month. And I believe they're probably using AI to kind of convert this into some sort of timestamp or something like that. And anyhow, but I'm not sure. Okay. And then they have like on-chain event. I pulled up, one of the some contract here. And if you go through, like, if you don't know what an event is, basically, sometimes when you have a function called, like, let's say you called add liquidity, right? And then inside that contract, there is also an event, okay? Inside the docs here, there's a pretty good, easy example. So let me go there. Okay, here. So as you can see, owner changed. So every time there would be a function that's like change owner, and you would the users, maybe the company or the protocol who's the team who's running this they want to change the owner, and if that owner is changed, you want to have some automatic triggering event. You want to like withdraw your money or something like this, right? So you'd have to kind of dig through the contracts and find the event. So if you think about it like this way, it's hard for Gelato to monitor when functions are called, but if the function when it's called also has an event that is emitted, and you can see those, like I said, you can see those events emitted when functions are called. This is a single function emitting like a whole bunch of events, right? So when you see that when that event is emitted, then you can automatically trigger an action that you want to do, right? And then every block is basically, it's going to, like, every single block, it's going to do something, okay? Now, as you can see down here, what do you want to trigger? And you'll also see it inside time intervals. So if you go to time intervals, TypeScript, Solidity function or transaction, as well as probably in there as well, and every block. So there are 3 things that you can kind of use to trigger. These are kind of like pre-triggers or a sense. Okay, so especially this one. So a TypeScript function is like to make it very simple, like the devs who know what this is will probably understand much better than what I'm, but just to give the layman user an idea what this TypeScript thing is, it's basically like a server somewhere, like a centralized server kind of has a whole bunch of logic because, that logic's maybe too complicated for on-chain, or they want to kind of protect that like algorithm or that math or what have you, or that logic. uh, they want to protect it from other people from seeing because maybe it can be front run or sandwiches or something like this. So there's some sort of logic on a server, and that server's running that logic. But this thing here can kind of go, and trigger a function in that server. That server will do its math, do its magic, and then call the function on blockchain. So this is something, as you can see, it's in private beta. You have to apply for this access. So it's a little bit centralized in that sense, but it's still put on IPFS and stuff like this. So I'm not going to get into it too deep because it's, if you wanted to use this, you would have to be a full stack dev and you'd already understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so the Solidity function is pretty simple. Okay, this is pretty cool. So basically, in your smart contract, you can have a kind of a check or some sort of logic inside your smart contract to check something. And then if that checking is done, then you would call another thing. Okay, so um, and then this one here is just basically call that function. Okay, so I'm going to use this one. These are very similar. This is first do a call one function, and if that function is returns true, then call this function. Whereas this is just call the function. Okay, so some examples of this might be like, oh, I want to call this function. So remember at the top I chose every block, right? So maybe I wanted to choose every day. But so I'm going to call this every day, but I only want to call it if gas is low enough, right? So then you would you would set inside your contract or inside even another contract. Like this is a contract address. These contract addresses don't need to be the same. So you can deploy a contract that just checks the gas, right? Or checks the gas and the balance of your contract, right? So I want to I want to call this function every day if gas is low and my contract has enough money to warrant that. So you would have to build a contract that kind of has that logic set up, and then you could call this function. So for example, if I just take this is on Etherscan. What are my Phantom Ether? Let's just take this and see if there's anything inside there. I'm not 100% familiar, but as you can see, so you could go through here and you could kind of like, oh, I want to, pause, skim. You would need something that returns a Boolean. So anyhow, I'm not going to really get into it, but basically you would set up in this contract some sort of function, like let's say swap. And I don't want to use swap because there's so many perimeters. Let's just pause. Okay. So I'd set up a contract, or this could be in the same contract. This logic could be embedded in my same contract, and I would then call this function. And if this function returned Boolean true, then this other function that I would say, oh, then I want to call, let's say, is there a harvest in here? No, there isn't. Let's go with uh, remove liquidity, okay? And then I would also, so as you can see, this one's not asking me for this data. So this first function here would have to supply the data to call this automated function here. And then you give it a task name and you create the task, and then it'll start running. Now there are some like that's kind of complicated and kind of hard to understand for people who don't really need this. I think for the average user or for the normal person who just wants to kind of create a small amount of automation, then stuff like if they pull liquidity, I want to pull my liquidity and swap it out, or I want to remove, or if uh, they change the owner of the contract, then I want to I want to pull my liquidity, or if my contract has enough money, is built up enough money, then I want to trigger it to buy this or sell this or trade this or something like that. There are a lot of like simple automations, and it's pretty open to your ideas, right? So I would definitely look at this and kind of consider whether or not you want to add Gelato automation to your workflow, and you can kind of do make your life a little bit easier in some sense. So I kind of rambled on quite a lot there, but I do hope this has been useful and interesting. And I really like Gelato, and like I said, I've used it for quite some time, and now I'm trying to build some new tasks to run with Gelato. Okay, so thanks so much for watching, and goodbye.